Please welcome Executive Director of Global Programming at the Milken Institute, Conrad Kiechel.
Good afternoon and hello. Thank you for joining us today at the 28th Milken Institute Global Conference. It's always wonderful to be able to come together in person and never more so than now. The theme of this year's conference is, as you see, Toward a Flourishing Future. For nearly 3 decades, fueled by the practical optimism that is part of the DNA of the Milken Institute, Global Conference has explored the most urgent challenges of the day so that we can better shape a shared future. This year, we gather in a time of disruption and uncertainty, which will certainly be the focus of many discussions and debates in these days. Even so, there endures a reassuring backdrop of promise, given transformative advances in generative artificial intelligence, biomedical innovation, and so many other fields. Throughout the conference, we have woven threads that address human flourishing. To us, that's more than just promoting prosperity. Flourishing also means fostering conditions in which individuals can reach their innate potential and live lives of meaning and purpose. We hope that that inspires and informs your experience in the next hours and days. I know that the discussion that is about to take place on this stage, business and the global economy, driving growth and innovation, will be both informative and, since it is moderated by the Wall Street Journal's Gerard Baker, lively. Again, thank you for joining us and have a wonderful global conference.
Please welcome the panel on Business and the Global Economy, Driving Growth and Innovation.
Good afternoon and welcome to this panel on the global economy, innovation, growth, and various other words that we all talk about all the time when we think about the global economy. Hope you've enjoyed your lunch. Think of this as an additional dessert, I think, to exercise your appetite. It's a great panel we've got here. You know them all, so I don't need to go through introductions. I'm going to get straight into it. Obviously, we've seen over the last 30 years, everybody knows we've seen this extraordinary expansion of global growth, of rising prosperity, particularly in much of the emerging world. But also throughout the world, we've seen this extraordinary expansion of global trade, capital flows, the integration of the global economy. And it's been a key driver, arguably the key driver of much of the growth that we've seen over the last 30 years. Whatever happens, and we're not going to get into too much detail about what's happening right now between the US and its trading partners over tariffs and what kind of deals, what kind of concessions the US may be able to make. All this is taking place against the wider backdrop of much of that globalization, if you like, if not exactly going into reverse so far, then at least it seems to have stalled. We've seen both political challenges, geopolitical challenges, rising concerns about national security. We had the pandemic and all the concerns that gave rise to over global supply chains and the desire to protect supply, to improve resilience. So my starting point for this is, given the changed environment that we are living in, what does it mean? How do we achieve the kind of growth? Can we achieve the sort of growth that we've seen over the last 25, 30 years if we're living in a somewhat different global economic environment? So Ajay Banga, President of the World Bank, I'm going to start with you, if I may. Tell us what you think. I mean, how much do you think globalization has stalled or is even going into reverse? And if it is, what are going to be, what should we be looking for to develop the key drivers of growth going forward?
Yes, thank you. And Jerry, I think that the globalization, the way we've known it, has been changing for a little while in some ways. If you think about the basic model of globalization that said you were making a T-shirt in the Carolinas and now you would make it in Vietnam because there was labor arbitrage in that, and eventually logistics arbitrage as well. And therefore, everybody was happy. You got a job in Vietnam and you got a cheap T-shirt in America. The problem with that is the individual in America who didn't keep their job is no longer interested in that model. And I think fundamentally, that change has been happening for a few years, which is why you've seen more regional and bilateral deals being struck in the past decade than you've seen in the prior couple of decades. So I would argue with you that this model has been under some kind of flux for a little while. It's of course become an even more important issue today because the fact that the US is confronting it directly and head on over the last few months. The way I speak to the countries I'm involved with, which is the developing world, is I tell them, first of all, come and do the negotiation you have to do with the US because uncertainty of this type is bad for everybody, your country as well as for the US. But then there are two other aspects that are important. One is that it is true that the United States has historically had the lowest level of tariffs of any country in the world. Even with the 10% tariff, if it goes in as a base, it's still among the lowest tariffs of anybody in the world. The developing world tends to have higher tariffs and higher non-tariff barriers as well. We know if you reduce those, everybody benefits. So what I'm trying to tell them is use the political tailwind that a crisis is creating in your country to try and make a change on your approach to tariffs and non-tariff barriers, first. But there's a second one, trade among themselves. So global trade has doubled over the last 20 years. And the share of the developing world in that has also doubled to half. Within the half, the trade among themselves has also doubled to half. But then you pick Africa, or you pick South Asia, or you pick Latin America and the Caribbean, and their intra-regional trade is a much lower percentage than it is, say, in East Asia or Europe itself. And so the opportunity for growth also comes from changing how you think about all that in the coming period.
So do you think actually, almost paradoxically, that even as we confront a world in which trade barriers do seem to be going up, particularly obviously with regard to the US, but to some extent, we've seen Brexit in the UK, in Europe and elsewhere. Are you saying that maybe paradoxically this crisis, if you like, provides an opportunity for countries that have traditionally been, have put up tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers, actually for them to seize the moment and actually encourage the development of more trade?
Absolutely, and think about it differently. Don't only think about it in global trade terms, but think about regional and bilateral trade as a real opportunity. It kind of connects to a topic that I hope we get to discuss about, which is job creation and how to create those without relying on the old global trade model. But I don't want to take all the time from this crowd.
It's fascinating, and I loved Mariam from 2.0, you from Abu Dhabi, from the United Emirates. You've been, that's a part of the world that's seen extraordinary growth and development over the last 20, 30 years. Really developed, really benefited both from this globalization, but also from the, the dynamism of the economy, the development of trade and financial flows, of course, traditionally with some energy as well. How do you see this? Do you see this as a moment of opportunity? What's going on right now for more, for actually for many parts of the world that maybe haven't been as open to the kind of things that you've seen in your region, to actually open up and to produce the kind of development that we've seen elsewhere in the last 20 years?
Thanks, Jerry. Absolutely. We see this as a time of opportunities. I mean, just for example, as a country, the UAE and the EU are now discussing a free trade agreement. This was something that before was a little bit difficult to kickstart. At 2.0, we're really, if I look at the portfolio companies, we are an AI enabler, we are an energy transition accelerator, and we empower communities. And looking at the opportunities within the portfolio companies, we start looking at how we can support each other. We're big believers in private-public partnerships. So we're in the mining business. This was a deal between our mining company, IRH, and the Zambian government, where we acquired 51% of the Mopani copper mine. We've got Al Suwaidi Electric. They're known for their cable manufacturing transformers. They're building in Egypt, or they've built already the Bemban solar park. It's one of the largest in Africa. these are all private-public partnerships that really are long-term. What we start looking at is we look at our partners and we say, who's in trouble, for example? Because these are, I mean, we're in rough times right now, and some partners are maybe struggling more than others. So we reach out to them. Can we maybe change some payment terms between us and them? Again, this is all about how do you help your partners in times in difficult times. Because we're a global investment platform, different regions are reacting differently. We're always, we've learned through being in a noisy neighborhood about just keeping calm, taking decisions not so dramatically, just let it pass through. These are rough times right now. Let us reach out to partners. Let us unlock opportunities between the portfolio companies and see how we can help each other more. So I really see this as a time of opportunity.
When you say these are rough times now, without obviously going into details of personal conversation you've been having, what are people concerned about? Is it what they're seeing in the sort of global economy and global geopolitical environment? Is that what?
Yeah,
is that
I
the
guess
concern?
you're just waiting to see, are countries going to react? Are there going to be again? I just see that we're in times of a little bit of a shake-up in the world. These are times when I see that the EU hopefully can step up as the EU. These are times where I see that also regions, for example, the GCC, can actually do more together and between each other. So I just see that we always try to look at the positive side, the opportunistic side of things when we're in times like these.
Rich Lesser of BCG, you talk to CEOs, companies around the world all the time. One of the reasons, obviously, that we have seen the kind of pressures that we're seeing here in the United States politically, we've seen it in Europe, in other countries too, is that they're as beneficial for the global economy as this period of globalization was. It did create huge costs, especially in the developed world, especially much of the industrialized world. Isolated costs, obviously, a lot of offshoring. A lot of people, companies were able to take advantage of low-wage working environments elsewhere, and it's that sense of lost jobs, of lost opportunities, of course, again, that has been driving the politics of this. Is that, as you look at this, and you look at what President Trump is doing, how the rest of the world is responding, do you see a way through here that can somehow meet those legitimate concerns that many people in the industrialized world have, while also maintaining the opportunities for growth that we've seen elsewhere?
I do see a way, but I don't want to underestimate the challenge of that. There are many, many people in developed markets, and certainly in the developing world, that have felt left behind in a world where wealth has increased dramatically over the last decade, and it will take a lot of work to do it. And I think the failure to really take that on in a meaningful way is part of what's led to this really dramatic set of announcements around trade that have opened up this negotiation with a highly uncertain endpoint to it right now. I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on governments around the world to figure out what they're doing to support younger workers, people who were in the manufacturing environment and may have been left behind. Even if manufacturing comes back to the US in a big way, it will never come back the way it did before. The Pittsburgh I grew up in, with steel mills with thousands and thousands of jobs, so much more is automated, whether it's in auto or steel or other industrial. So I think that a lot of what needs to happen will be, how do we invest across the workforce, how do we create opportunities, but not think of it as going backwards, but what we're building looking ahead. And that's going to be the real pressure, because I think we always tend to remember history, particularly in a place like the United States. It's had such many years of prosperity. We look back with rose-colored glasses, but we won't go back to that. We'll have to go forward to something different, but it has to provide a broader base of opportunity than the world we've been in.
Without asking you to comment on the specifics of the politics, do you think this idea, there is this idea, which President Trump very much promotes, Scott Besson has talked about it, Howard Lutnick, that the US can somehow recreate a manufacturing base. By the way, it has a significant manufacturing base already, a very large one, but they can recreate large numbers of manufacturing jobs And it can do that in a way that is also consistent, obviously, with the with the demand for relatively low prices. I mean, that seems to me to be the conundrum here. You know, the US is really not going to bring, you know, Ajay talked about T-shirt manufacturing in the Carolinas. You know, we're presumably not going to be reshoring those kind of jobs. Do you see a possibility for more of the high-tech, the high-end jobs coming to the US, or is that where, you know, is there a real potential for growth there, or is that also just, you know, kind of ultimately at the margins?
I do see that, and I thought Secretary Bessent this morning was terrific in trying to sort of share the overall narrative of what the administration was trying to do, and to sort of show how we're looking at a journey that's only partway in, and it's hard to project where that will net out. I don't think it will be at the magnitude of in terms of the magnitude of jobs. Anywhere in the world, manufacturing is going to reduce as a share of global capacity of jobs. I think even in China, a lot of the latest factories, they've grown a huge share of global production. Up to 35% of global production is now produced in China. But many of the modern factories are done in a much more automated way. But I do think there's a possibility, and frankly, it was right to call out, and it's really important, the loss of competitiveness in the US on key technologies is really substantial. If you compare where the US was in terms of industrial competitiveness 15 years ago, I'm not going back 50 years, versus today, there's been a marked decline. And I think finding ways to spur that, whether tariffs will be the ultimately, I mean, we're in the middle of a negotiation, so I don't want to presume the outcome. But whether tariffs is the outcome versus some of the tax and regulatory incentives, the encouragement to build, hopefully investing in technology, making it easier to educate a population. We need more engineers. We need to do a lot of things to strengthen the industrial base in this country. And so whether that'll be achieved or not, I don't know, but I think it's an important requirement.
Gilberto Tomassoni from JSB Brazil, obviously, but again, a global business. How do you see, you know, say the next 5 to 10 years in terms of the global opportunities in your business? What are the challenges that you're going to face? Are you expecting to see, you know, growth of opportunities in that time, or are we going to expect a world where those global opportunities are more restricted?
I strongly believe that food sector should be placed, should be the center of the agenda for the sustainable growth. We see population grow, we see trends of the market grow, change in terms of to have more consumption of proteins. We see that if we want to have a sustainable growth for countries, for companies, if we want to reduce poverty, hungry, we need to look for agriculture, for food system, because 68% of the adults that live in poverty rely on the agriculture for these livelihoods. And the other part, agriculture could be a strong opportunity for growth. First, because we have more consumption of protein. The second, because we need to tackle the climate change. By the way, I believe that we can change the agenda, not climate agenda, but food security agenda. Because we know today we have 2.3 billion people suffer severe or moderate food insecurity. 630 million people live in hungry. This is something that the world should be thinking about. And we see the agriculture, the opportunity for growth. How agriculture can grow? There is many ways to grow. But one thing I want to stress here, we need to put at the center of the agenda agriculture as opportunity for growth and for tackle the climate. And just, if you make the calculation today, just less than 4% of the investment in tackle the climate challenge goes to agriculture, and less than 1% to go to the developed countries. Means that we need to reframe all of the strategy for tackle the climate. Climate should be food security. And beside of that, you see, look, and how we are growing food security? A lot of innovation. But innovation not goes just for technology innovation. Means that innovation, how we produce, innovation, how we consume, innovation, how we live. When we talk about innovation, how we produce, we need to scale regenerative agriculture. We can, with regenerative agriculture, we can treat the health of the soil, we can fix the carbon in the soil, and we can boost the biodiversity.
Right.
Means that food security, for me, it's an opportunity for growth.
Okay, so let's look at the components of growth and how they might be developed and what we might achieve. Every economic student knows that growth ultimately comes from labor growth and productivity growth. So let's start with labor, Ajay. And I know you made a very important point of this at the World Bank. And jobs, what kind of job? We'll come on, by the way, and talk about artificial intelligence and technology and how that both enhances and perhaps challenges the employment situation. But give us a sense, where are the jobs coming from in the next 5 to 10 years, Ajay?
So the developing world has 1.2 billion young people who are going to come through the pipe ready for a job in the coming 12 to 15 years. And everybody talks about that as a demographic dividend. And I think it is if those people get clean air, clean water, healthcare, and education when they're growing up. But once they're available to work, they either need to work with somebody or have a chance to be an entrepreneur, kind of what Mariam was talking about. I think that's a key aspect of this. The problem is the same countries that they're growing up in are currently forecast to generate 400 million jobs or so in that period. Now, forecasts are not destiny, and forecasts are made by economists, and they can be wrong. But you can't be wrong by 800 million people. So we have a problem, and this so-called demographic dividend is not a light at the end of the tunnel. It is a freight train coming our way. And the reason I talk about it that way is, if today you're worried about social unrest or socially incompatible circumstances, or you're worried about illegal migration, you just need to wait 5 years and see the multiplier effect of that. Europe gets, on the average, 3 million legal migrants a year and 600,000 illegal migrants. If you wait 5 years, the number from Africa itself will multiply many times that number. So that's the crisis that I see if we don't do something about it. What I'm saying you have to do about it is to focus on sectors that do not have the same model of outsourcing of OECD jobs. And there are plenty of those. I'll give you 5 sectors we're very focused on very quickly. One is infrastructure. Bridges, roads, airports, healthcare, education, digitization, electricity. We are connecting 300 million people in Africa to electricity by 2030. 600 million people in Africa today have zero electricity. You cannot do any growth, jobs, development, anything without electricity. So that's one example. Second one is agriculture as a business, the point Gilberto was talking about. The biggest problem in the emerging markets is smallholder farmers, their kids don't want to be farmers. They think of it as a dead end. So what they do is they sell their land, and when they sell the land, they think they're rich. 4 years later, they're in shanty towns in urban cities called the urban poor. That's what happens to them. You got to find a way to keep them on their business, in their farm, and thinking about it as a future. The best way to do that is cooperatives, technology, better fertilizer, better marketing, better produce, better prices for their produce, an AI tool that if you were to use a phone, you could say, I see my crop has that sickness, and here's what I can get from my cooperative, a spray that can fix it. Simple things, Jerry, that are possible to do with what we can do today. A third one is primary health care. Now, obviously, you need a healthy population for jobs, but think of it differently. If you deliver primary health care into the population, you will create jobs for nurses, medical diagnostic readers, midwives, PPE manufacturers, pharmaceutical manufacturing, not just doctors. And so we've announced we're going to reach 1.5 billion people with primary health care by 2030. Fourth is tourism. Tourism is the single biggest multiplier for every dollar invested. One job in the tourism sector creates 4 indirect jobs. $1 invested in tourism generates more jobs than in any other sector. None of these 4 sectors require outsourcing from the OECD. The fifth one is manufacturing for local and regional consumption, but value added where jobs are made locally. So to give you an example, Argentina has 20% of the world's lithium. I was there 3 or 4 weeks ago when we made the big announcement of the support that all of us were giving to Milei as he turns the economy from managing it into a fiscal surplus to actual growth. And the World Bank is putting $12 billion into Argentina to make it happen. One of the things we're doing is investing with companies like Rio Tinto and others to help look at the lithium mines and create local jobs there. Not just jobs by which you extract the mineral and send it elsewhere, but you create the jobs in Argentina. These are eminently doable. To create jobs, you need 3 things to happen. You need enabling infrastructure, which government should provide over time through public-private partnerships, but at the beginning, through the public sector. Second, you need regulations and policies that make sense. Labor reform, land reform, bankruptcy reform, mobile collateral law, blah, blah. And third, you need the private sector. The private sector is what creates 85% of the jobs in the world. The public sector does not. It's only an enabler. Once you get these 3 factors right, which we think we can help with by how we put our money to work, it is entirely a feasible exercise to start turning the tide on these large gap between where the people are and where the jobs are. The reality is talent is everywhere and opportunities are not. Our job is to change that picture.
That's a fascinating way of framing it. And Mariam, I want to come to you because I know a lot of the things that Ajay just mentioned there are very much the activities that your business is involved in. You talked about infrastructure and minerals and energy and others. So obviously he's identified all those areas and he's identified the scale of the potential crisis in terms of the labor, the excess labor supply that will be there. So how do we meet, what are the financing mechanisms, what are the investment? Tell us, from your own personal perspective, but more generally, how we obtain how we go about, in addition to the help that the World Bank can provide, but how the private sector and through public and private partnerships, how we can develop the investment necessary in all of those fields.
So how we look at new economies now is that they're based on 2 pillars, energy and AI. I'm talking about the new economies. What's so important here, Jerry, is that AI needs energy and energy needs AI. And everything that Ajay talked about is you've got this AI, which is in the headlines, but where's the real deal? It's in the infrastructure. Something Ajay mentioned, and this is where 2.0 comes in. So
we're talking about energy and data.
Exactly. I just want to describe something to you. Maybe you don't. I mean, I myself, when I came into this sector, understanding what a hyperscaler needs in terms of infrastructure. When you're looking at a data center for a hyperscaler, they need about 10 to 20 hectares of space. That's like nearly 20 soccer fields. Then they need 100 megawatts of power. That's like for 100,000 homes. Then they need copper cables. The copper cables, I know it's 10,000 kilometers, that's 6,000 miles approximately. I mean, just think of the vast material and infrastructure you need. That's for one data center for a hyperscaler. So again, the energy needs AI, AI needs energy is a real conversation. The real deal lies in the infrastructure. The beauty about 2.0 is we have our financial services vertical, and we have the technology partners. And this is why I'm saying we also unlock a lot of opportunity between them, amongst ourselves. And for any new economy to thrive, as Ajay mentioned, everything that you need, the energy is the underlying substance that you need to power any new economy. And that's why it's so important to look at the different, we're looking at solar, we're looking at gas, we're looking at BESS systems, which are the battery energy storage systems. Nowadays, it's not, you try to think about, okay, if you want to run a solar park, you can't just run when the sun's shining. You want to run 24/7. So this is where the battery storage systems now make sense. As 2.0, we're actually looking to acquire a company that's making supercapacitor batteries with artificial graphene. Very interesting. Again, we're trying to look at scaling up. We're looking at the opportunities because we're fundamental believers that energy and AI are the foundations of any new economy.
Are those, especially renewable energy resources, available at scale? I mean, and at cost that makes it attractive on the scale. We're still a carbon-rich economy, and especially now we have an administration in Washington that is, enthusiastically pro-carbon, perhaps unlike the last administration. But are the opportunities really there on the scale to meet the kind of demands that
Yes.
we've been talking about?
So, again, this is coming from the UAE's DNA, 2006.
Where it's hot and sunny.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So
Okay.
2006,
Yeah.
believe it or not, before anyone was talking about renewable energy, we set up Masdar City, again with the belief in we need to diversify. We can't put everything into one energy source. We need to build the knowledge. We need to build the talent around it. We need to build the infrastructure around it. And it's a journey. That's why we always talk about the energy transition. And that's why 2.0 is accelerating the energy transition. In some places, it makes sense to go solar and wind, and other places, it doesn't make sense. So we really need to take a pragmatic approach at anything we do and look at what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. And again, going back to poverty, going back to survival, there are just some situations where it's like, okay, it cannot just be that we expect some countries to just switch a switch and say, that's it, you're only going to run on green energy. They can't. They need food. They need electricity. So we need to give them that transition to then help them and think about things like how can we reduce waste, how can we reduce emissions at the end. But again, we're big believers in this pragmatic journey.
I want to come to Richard and Gilbert on this topic too, but Ajay, you quickly wanted to chip in.
I actually just covered it. Exactly the point. Accessible, affordable energy, to me, is a human right. And therefore, getting that right is really important. Without energy, you don't create jobs. Without jobs, you don't kill poverty. So I think getting this sequence right, it's not always renewable. So in our 300 million people being connected in Africa, part of it is renewable energy, part of it is connecting grids which are already connected to non-renewable energy, because the idea is you've got to make an energy compact plan that suits that country at its point of time and then help it transition and do so responsibly over time. So in some countries like Senegal, which are sitting on gas reserves, why would you not help them use some of that gas as part of a transition fuel? Let's remember, Europe lives on gas other than France, and the US is the world's largest gas exporter. So we should just kind of get this in context and think about it in a local sense of what's relevant to that country. She said it really well. I completely agree.
Rich, as we know, the US has dominated, but in these areas that we're talking about, particularly AI, obviously, we've seen the investment that has gone into US companies, into US, and all of the things that Mariam was talking about, the data centers and the energy and everything else. And the US, in fact, generally speaking, until the last few months, has dominated these inward investment flows into the United States, and these areas have been huge. Is there, and maybe that's turning around now, as I say, in the last few months, we've seen, especially those some of those high valuations we've seen from some of those kind of AI-related companies maybe coming down a little bit. Is there the capital, frankly, in the current circumstances, especially given the kind of uncertain economic and broader financial climate we have, to make available the kind of financial resources that's necessary to build this sort of development?
So my sense is the key will be showing whether you can generate return off of this AI in the productivity and the incremental value you create in companies. A lot of the wagers so far has been, if we build it, this AI will be so powerful that the benefits will prove themselves out. Companies will want to invest massively in this, the way they've invested in other technology infrastructure over decades, and that will lead to a massive scaling and will provide the fuel, the revenue that will allow for this. But the bet is that companies in the rest of the economy, not the hyperscalers, will be able to use these technologies in a way to drive real productivity. And to me, what is so encouraging, particularly about the last 12 to 18 months, is we can now see examples of companies around the world, not just US companies. When I think of the 8 examples that jump to my mind of the places where people are using AI now to drive value, one is a large mining company in Asia Pacific. One is a huge manufacturer in Asia Pacific. One is an insurer based in the US. One is a big bank based in the US. One is a consumer company based in England. Another is another consumer company based in Europe, on continental Europe. One is a big automaker, a European automaker. And so for us right now, you know, yes, we work with the hyperscalers on their plans and their investment profiles, but most of our work in AI, which is now 20% plus of BCG, is actually helping the rest of the economy figure out how to actually translate the potential of AI, what you can do in a pilot test to actually impact at scale. And the interesting part of that is how much of that is not just taking on the algorithms, the AI algorithms, and the digital and data platforms, it's actually the human issues. Training, reskilling, upskilling, leadership, culture, process, workflow, all of those issues. And I'd say about a quarter of leading companies really feel like they have their hands around doing it, at least in some parts of their organization, and 3/4 are somewhere on the journey to getting there. And if I can just make one last point on this, what's so encouraging to me about what is happening in AI in terms of translating it into value is it speaks directly to the points that Ajay raised. When you look at those 5 areas he highlighted, in agriculture, AI and digitization has a huge role to play. In education, it could be transformative. In health, it will be transformative. You know, that in so many parts of what we need, not just to lift the developed world to the next level of productivity and growth, but to actually help emerging market countries around the world, AI has an enormous unlock potential to help get those countries onto the next plateau of productivity and growth.
Gilberto, can you talk a little bit about AI as it affects in your business, how you're implementing AI solutions in, you know, in agriculture, in foods, especially in, you know, in the broader field in which you're working? How is that, you know, how are you implementing it?
Jerry, I want to get a broader approach on this AI because I back the first question and I want to address what Ajay said as well. When we talk about agriculture, because our core is based on agriculture, and if we want to grow and to develop economy, to develop and tackle the hunger, the poverty, and the social development, we need to see sustainability, and not just as a protection of the environment, but the huge opportunity for increased productivity. If you tackle in this way, we can use AI, we can use biotechnology to increase productivity, because means that be sustainable means to produce more with less. And if this is first one, the second one, for me, it's important. We need to support the small farmers. Because the small farmers, as I mentioned before, how is the poverty, how is the hunger, the small farmers, they produce 30% the food that we consume, 30%. And we need to support them to make these transitions for more, and to allow them to access technology like artificial intelligence, biotechnology. And with how you can do that? If you are a technical assistant and you'll be smart on the financials, because we need to support long-time payback and to address the risk of the investment of the small farms. And if you are do that, we are make a transformation, a social transformation, not just a climate transformation, it will be a social transformation, and we will be much sure in terms of protect the environment.
Mariam, talk a little bit more about the public-private partnerships and what that approach, and actually Ajay too, I'd like your views on this, and what, you know, the opportunities that obviously exist, but also some of the concerns, some of the risks. What do private investors, what concerns do private investors have about the kind of partnerships that you're dealing with, or other countries have been dealing with?
I mean, again, with the areas that we're looking at 2.0, whether it's mining, energy, AI, these are huge endeavors that one company cannot do on its own. And that's why the partnerships are so important. And what we've kind of consistently been looking at is, we're looking at sort of the infrastructure projects that really have scale. And that's why investing with or alongside governments is very important in the things we do. As I explained, the Mopani copper mine, this partnership with the Zambian government, they have a target. They're like, we want to reach 3 million tons of copper by 2030. Okay, here we're coming as partners with you. We're going to operate the Mopani copper mine. We're ramping it up to 240,000 tons of copper. We're actually bringing in E.0, our energy arm, into the scene to green it. We're bringing the AI into it. We're bringing safety into it. I mean, when we started with this mine, imagine 2 kilometers underground, you had 500 meters apart poles with landlines. And if something happened, I mean, you can imagine, you have to run 500 meters to be able to get hold of someone. But we digitized the mine, and we brought signal 2 kilometers below. So safety's up, efficiency's up. Sorry, guys, it's really cold up here. I don't know if my nose is running, so sorry about that.
Wind.
Yeah, it's really, really cold up here. So.
We're using up a lot of that, a lot of that energy on air conditioning.
Exactly, exactly. So
thank goodness LA is sunny today.
Yeah,
no,
exactly. So these partnerships are so important. Again, you were talking about jobs. So this mine in particular created 2,000 jobs. For the local economy. We really made sure in the supply chain, we looked at local procurement, we looked at women empowerment, how we can have women do more work. There was a great example, some of the waste from the copper was used for jewelry making. So many things we could look at how we could really ensure that we're supporting the government, we're supporting the communities, we're looking at upgrading a hospital. There's a lot you have to do socially as well when you're in the mining business. When we look at energy, I mean, we've got, there's a company, Beltone, they're a financial institute in Egypt. They basically mobilized the capital needed for Al Suwaidi, which is our cable and transformers and EPC contractors to help with the Benban Solar Park. So it's just, we're seeing so many opportunities in public-private partnerships in mobilizing capital, mobilizing technical services, and then scaling up the projects.
Ajay, I mean, you could answer the broader question, but also if you can give us specific examples of
Absolutely.
the kind of partnerships that have been very effective.
Sure. So, look, if you want to do all those 5 sectors I was talking about to create jobs, there's no way you can do it with either public money or multilateral development banks or philanthropy. The quantum required is many multiples. The only way you'll get there is with the private sector's capital and technology and innovation and that kind of stuff. So we set up a group of CEOs who were advising us on what is it that the World Bank kind of institution can do to enable you in the private sector to bring more money to play in those sectors. And it turns out there are 5 clear things. Those are the 5 examples. The first one we talked about, regulatory policy clarity. And I remember this from my days as a CEO, which I miss enormously, by the way, but that job, at the end of the day, if I did not have clear regulatory policy certainty in a country, I would take my marbles and play elsewhere. It's just reality. And therefore, countries cannot always point to someone else not coming if you don't get your own house in order on policy and clarity of that. That's the first piece. So in the 300 million people being connected to electricity in Africa, the first thing we did, we got 27 heads of state and their finance ministers and energy ministers in a conference in Tanzania in front of private sector players, including people from the UAE who came there in big numbers. And the idea was, tell us what your energy compact plan is for the coming years. And the World Bank said, if you execute that plan, we will give you budgetary support on a pay-for-results basis. So today, 50+% of our money is given on a pay-for-results basis for that kind of drive. Second, even if I get that, I want political risk guarantees. That we can do. We actually provide those in different parts of the bank. We've put them together, created a simplified platform. We're now about 30% higher than we were last year at this time. We think we can double in the coming years. We would lay that off in the reinsurance industry. There are people here from that industry. They're my best partners to help me do this. The third is, even if you do that, would people like us be willing to take first loss, junior equity in a project, so that if a project looks just about there but not quite there. So she's investing in Zambia in mining, and she looks at it and says, I need a little more reassurance. And if I were to come in an IFC, one of our institutions, with her and take junior equity, it probably would take her over the edge to put the money to work. The problem with that is, if I take a loss anywhere, at some point I've got to start going back to my shareholders for getting more money, and that's something I'd like to avoid. So I'm trying to create a buffer, a shock absorber fund with my own retained earnings and money from philanthropies and others to help me absorb the vicissitudes of equity investing. The fourth is foreign exchange. And there, the best solution is long-term capital markets, but all countries aren't going to get them, and it's going to take a while to get there. Meanwhile, what we're trying to do is do swaps with local commercial banks who have excess liquidity in their system. They park it to the central bank overnight for a few basis points. We give them more than that, and we can then lend that currency, and we take the hedging of that currency onto our books. That's what we should be doing. We're now at IFC, 44% of our lending is local currency, as an example. The problem is you can't get to 80 with that trick. You do need to have these local liquidity and capital markets developments happening. But the fifth one, to me, is the most interesting. A lot of people talked up the trillions waiting and sitting in pension funds and sovereign wealth funds and reinsurance and insurance companies. They would just rush into these countries to invest when the opportunity was clear. It never showed up. And the reason is, that's not how pension funds invest. They don't do project by project. They want to get, in the investment eyes of their CIO, they're looking for a risk-weighted return that cuts across different categories of risk. What you need to do is what you did in the mortgage market in the US, create bundled packages of standardized loans with a rating agency wrapper attached to them. And a person can say, okay, I can see this paper, it's got an A- kind of rating, I think 92 cents in the dollar, I'm home to do it. I'm trying to do that in the infrastructure world. If I went to let's say, the Canadian pension plan, and I said to them, I would love to give you exposure to water in Africa, wouldn't you? They would say yes. But then I give them loans from 20 countries for 20 million, 30 million, 100 million, special covenants everywhere, and they're going to say, go away. But if I package them and create a security, then it's a different game. So Doug Peterson, who used to run Standard & Poor's, just retired. He's helping us do this along with a bunch of pension plans and asset managers. And we're trying to create this as a marketable security. It will take 2-3 years. Countries are used to having special covenants in their loans. Our people are used to doing that. The market doesn't quite understand these. There's a question of preferred creditor treatment. How do you deal with that? Who'll take the equity risk in it? There's a bunch of things we're working our way through. But those are 5 clear examples where the private sector, with help from institutions like ours, can make a difference.
Rich, what's your latest thinking or the latest research when it comes to AI on the impact on labor? There's on one extreme, there's the view that everything's going to we're all going to be out of work. Even management consultants, Rich, certainly journalists. The journalists have definitely. Half our jobs are already.
We're gonna have.
You're
We're gonna have
higher
a.
up on the list.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to.
We're gonna have a
we're
bot.
on the list.
We're gonna have a bot interviewing us. We don't need
And
Jerry.
nobody would really miss the journalists, unlike the management consultants, I'm sure. But where? I mean, and yet of course we know that waves of innovation also produce their own, labor opportunities too. What's your latest thinking? What do you think the latest thinking is on?
So first of all, we have to have a lot of humility right now, and I'll just start by saying, literally exactly 10 years ago, I was on panels as digitization was rolling out. Ajay was in some of those sessions as well.
Yeah.
And the whole conversation was, digitization's going to kill all the jobs. We're not going to have any, everything's going to get digitized. We won't need any people. And now here we are 10 years into that journey, and we're at a near full employment economy in many parts of the world, and generally employment has done quite well. So there's always a tendency when a new technology comes to say how that's going to be this one's going to break the 200-year trend, and this is the one that's going to take all the jobs away. And so we just have to start with that as a backdrop. I think in this case, what we see happening is where we are now, most companies don't see this as replacing all their labor. They see this as helping to remove tasks from people that the machines can do equally well and sometimes better, and to enable people, whether they're customer service workers or software writers or marketers, to get leverage in a way that they've never gotten leverage before, whether it's a machine listening, an AI tool listening into the customer service call to help advise them to be able to make that call both better for the customer and shorter, or whether it's actually cascading a marketing campaign around the world, or whether it's actually writing a lot of the software that would be written. And so right now it's more of a partnership model. I would, however, make two caveats. One is these technologies get better every year. The most obvious is the GitHub, Claudes of the world that will be writing software better and better, and really putting at risk a lot of traditional software jobs that got written. And I think the second is that companies are learning. They're in a learning stage now, and they may learn more about how to do that. So my expectation is we will see enormous amount of individual task displacement with AI. We are already starting to see it in leading companies, and we will see it in more places. We will also see it opening up new ideas we haven't had before, just like every generation of a technology revolution. But it will be more pressure than we've had because of the speed.
Do you think it's a big growth driver? I mean, I've seen some people estimate, rethinking their estimates of trend growth in, especially in the developed economies, and Gilberto, please feel free to talk about AI as well here, and actually saying that, we've been locked in this, but, the US has maybe had 2.5% trend growth for a while, Europe a little bit less, but actually it could be a real productivity enhancer and a real driver of accelerated growth. Do you think
There's no question. I mean, and I want to highlight it in both senses. I think it will be productivity in an operational sense, things that you can just do really efficient with these tools that you couldn't do before. I'm also probably even more excited and hopeful in what it can do to help us be just more innovative. I mean, we are working with leading biopharma companies who are using these tools to generate new molecules, new ways to tackle diseases, new approaches. And so I'm actually hoping that some of the things we'll be most excited to talk about in years is where we use AI to unlock a new way of thinking, a new idea, and it's the combination of people and technology to come up with something that people alone have not been successful so far.
I can give an example how we are using AI in our company. First of, we use to connect to the consumers. With the AI, we are able to connect direct to the consumers. We are able to exchange information with the consumers. We get more insight to develop the product, the needs, the consumers, the wants. Is the first one, is the most important for a food company, to be in touch with the consumer needs. The second one is help us to better predict forecasting the demand. We work with the retailers to get the data of the retailers, and they predict what is the consumption and to produce exactly what we need to avoid waste. About the waste in the retail, about the waste all over the supply chain. The third, we use to improve productivity inside of the factory because we get more data, we are able to better produce. The third, in the farms, we use the AI to better take care of the health of the chicken, of the hogs, or of the cows. Because we get more information, we are connected, we can predict, we can use. UI is everything. But I want to add another thing, that we are now talking about AI. I totally agree, and we use as much we can because we want to improve productivity, we want to produce more with less. But there is biotechnology that has the same potential or more potential than the UI to transform and to increase productivity. In our company, we are investing in center of biotechnology to not just to produce cultivated meat, but to help to understand all of the environment in order to predict to be health of our herds, and to predict vaccines, to predict everything. I think it's to produce seeds that can support less water. I think there is a huge opportunity for growth. I think this, the combination of biotechnology and UI, we can really speed up the productivity and accelerate everything they can. I'm so confident that there will be change a lot. And this will be affect our productivity. And we are affect our productivity, we can produce more. And we need to produce more with less. And I just to repeat myself, this is for me is a fundamental to produce more with less because we have more people to feed.
Jerry, I just want to
quickly,
jump in for...
Quickly, if you want, because I've got one final question.
I also think that AI is going to help us to solve the global challenges we have, whether it's food security, whether it's water security, whether it's energy security. I do believe that AI is going to support us in that. Again, this is why it's so important for the new economies to scale up energy needs, AI needs. Again, this is how the UAE really, when I think about the forward-thinkingness of the UAE, so the Abu Dhabi government is already set to become an AI-driven government by 2027. We set up a budget for it. Infrastructure is starting to grow. We've got an AI officer in every local government. On the business side, we're AIing our operations, taking it down to our subsidiaries. I think within 6 to 8 months, you're going to see a huge change in productivity and efficiency. And I do believe, again, I look at this very optimistic. By the way, on the education side, in the curriculums, in September 2025, all schools in the UAE will have AI from kindergarten all the way up to grade 12. It's happening, it's real, and I do believe that it will be a game changer and it will be our support to solve some of these global challenges we have.
Okay, I'm a journalist and one of my daughters is a teacher, so that doesn't look very good for our family's income. But we're down to the last few minutes, so very quick final question to all of you, and just give us a 1-minute answer if you would. Pretty well everything we've talked about here about how to develop opportunities for growth have come down to things like deregulation. Ajay, you've talked about the importance about that. Openness, economic openness, openness to trade, there's investment, risk-taking investment in some of these new innovative technologies. And yet, and this is almost a sort of a political question, there is a tremendous amount of insecurity that people feel right now. I think a simple way of explaining so much of what's gone on in the world politically in the last few years, whether here or in Europe or in other parts of the world, is this rising sense of insecurity. There's insecurity, there's geopolitical insecurity, which we've obviously seen on a big scale, in the Middle East, in Europe, in Asia. There is economic insecurity, people concerned about, uncertain times. There's technological insecurity and almost an existential insecurity driven by AI, despite what we've talked about. People feel, what's the future? Not only is what's the future of my job, but what is the future of me as a human being in a world dominated by AI? And I wonder, again, just very quickly from all of you, in that environment of widespread insecurity, there's migration insecurity, people are concerned about, things like that, can you really Is that a favorable environment in which to make some of these pretty big changes and investments in direct investments, but also things like changes in political environment and policy and that kind of stuff? Is that really, isn't there a tension there between this rising insecurity and the need for us to be more open and be more bold and risk-taking? Very briefly, each of you.
I think there's absolutely the right time to do it, because insecurity creates the opportunity for us to actually do things differently from what we were doing till now. Otherwise, where is the impetus going to come from to change that? And I believe that this is the kind of conversation and the kind of opportunity that we see ahead of us in the coming period. I will tell you, despite what you say, I meet governments and countries and private sectors all over the world. In the last 2 years, I have traveled more than I did in the previous 3 or 4 years, if that were possible. And I find while there is insecurity, there is a deep desire to engage on the topic of jobs. It's the one thing, Jerry, that holds everybody together, everywhere.
Mariam.
Opportunity for change is always good.
Yeah.
I got all the CEOs of all the companies under 2.0 together. We spoke about, first of all, what we're seeing. We spoke about opportunities. We spoke about helping partners in need. We spoke about distressed assets that could be now interesting to look at. So we're always looking at the half glass full, not empty.
Rich?
Yeah, great point.
I have some sympathy for the way you posed the question, meaning I think when people are feeling insecure and uncertain, there's more of a desire to hunker down than to be bold and to invest. And I do think that's a challenge in the world right now, the number of people feeling uncertain and insecure. And I think that the real question is, can we create a generation of leaders in the private sector and in the public sector and in the social sector, that can show that they can use these technologies with citizens in mind to make a better world for people, whether it's people in a local community in a developed country or whether it's an emerging market. And I think there's an enormous pressure. It is harder to be a leader right now than it has ever been, because it's not just about delivering the next quarter or the next couple of years. It's about the ability to engage so many people. And I think the pressure on leadership right now is enormous, and those that step up can deliver incredible value with this.
And Gilberto, you get the last word.
I just given a real example about our company, that how we are facing this challenge. We have 7-year company, and we are a global company. We are present in 17 countries with 200 factories units and more than 350 customers. We are reach 190,000 countries, and all the times we face, each one of it, we are not saying this is different. It can be different to one sector to the other sector, but we build these diversified platforms in terms of geography, in terms of proteins, in order to manage situation. And all the times we focus in things that we control, we have control. And you are excited with the opportunity for growth, because when there is a crisis, when there is an uncertainty, when there is a risk, inside of these things, there is opportunities. And this way the company look. And we are open to be public in the US, listed in the US, our company. We see it as an opportunity for growth.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we proved that AI may be about to replace us all, but human beings can still host a pretty good discussion. So please join me in thanking this excellent panel for this great conversation. Thank you.